The circle of law was one of the very first systems of democracy that ever existed in the Native Americas, in North America, and indeed informed a great deal the American Constitution. The circle of law has all kinds of different manifestations around the Americas. But one of the things that seemed to operate throughout all these different systems and forms was this. The council chiefs sat in their council were always women and men. They were not ever one or the other in those seats. They were both. Why? Because chiefs over thousands of years studying our natural universe had said, what do we see and understand as being the principles around which life seems to orientate itself? And one of those was balance between masculine and feminine. They understood that any system that lost that balance and ceased to acknowledge that balance would become a very dangerous system, a system likely to abuse. So in every seat, there was man and a woman. There were many aspects to it, but the bit I want to bring to you today was in the middle was this little fire. And this little fire was called the children's fire. And the children's fire in the middle of the council was a reminder to the council chiefs. No law shall be passed that will harm the children. No law shall be passed that will harm the children. Now, I was at a conference with business leaders a year and a half ago, and I was telling them about this. And I said, can you imagine how it would be if all our organizations, our businesses, our government, our schools, every organization that existed, placed the children's fire in the center of their decision making, reminded themselves of that law and pledged themselves to it? I said, can you imagine what the effect might be on our businesses? Can you imagine what the effect might be on our governments? Can you imagine what it might be in all of our different power structures, including religion? No decision will be taken, nothing, no action will be taken, nothing of that kind if it compromises that pledge. And there was silence in that room, real big silence. And then I asked the second question. I said, what kind of society is it that would not place the children's fire in the very center of its institutions of power? What kind of society is it that would not do that? A very long silence. And I was thinking to myself, an insane society is the kind of society that would do that. It was a very, very long silence. I mean, I'm not going to do the whole length of the silence, but it was extremely long, okay? And the guy who was chairing this meeting was the ex-sustainability director for Shell. And I'm sure a very decent, kind and sweet man. But he couldn't bear it any longer. That silence had gone on, and he bounced out of his chair. And he said, yes, well, thank you very much, Mac. That's very interesting. Food for thought, I'm sure. But right now, we have important work to do. Okay. So I started moving back to my chair, and a voice rang out from the back of the audience. Why don't you sit down? Hair up on the back of the neck, everyone just like, ooh, well, something's happening. Why don't you just sit down? We've been asked a question, and no one's felt that they can answer it. We're sat in some measure of grief because we know that it's taken the lid off something that is deeply painful to us, I think, this person said. I don't think that it serves us right now to go jumping past that silence. Why don't you sit down and let us return to that silence and the personal pain that it raises in us as we consider this. So this guy, floundering now, said, well, if everybody agrees, another long silence, and he retreated back towards his chair and shrunk into it. But you know, he wasn't a bad person. He's just a person, you know. He's just us. That's what I felt. He's just me. I know how he feels. He's just doing his best. Silence went on. And eventually, I just said, thank you. I really deeply appreciate that you've sat with this. But the question now exists, what will you do? Because if this is a normal conference, you will go back into your normal lives and you will forget about it. It might be a story you tell, but you will do nothing. What will you do? Because each of us has a sphere of influence. No matter how weak or little we feel. No matter how disempowered and enslaved we might feel in whatever circumstance we operate within, each of us has a sphere of influence. What if you made a promise? I will go into my life, and within the sphere of my influence I will place the children's fire back there, and I will not shirk from any conversation, any kind of situation. If it means I lose my job, I lose my job. If I have to lose my house, I lose my house. I have to ask myself, what is the compass bearing by which I navigate my life? It's either real or it's not. So, conference broke up. And a few months ago, I received an email from one of the chief executives sat there. And she said, we've done it. We've taken the children's fire. I took it to the boardroom and we sat down, the board of our company, we sat down and we said, and I invited them to make a pledge to the children's fire. Before they did that, I said, I must explain to you, this may have massive and uncompromising effects upon our business and how we do it. But I just cannot. I've been having sleepless nights about this thing, and I just feel like I will personally want to do it. Are you prepared to go with that? And they did, and I got this email, which I just thought, wow, okay. How incredibly exciting, and how incredibly beautiful, and what an amazing, amazing step to take. So I've talked to several others since, and they always say the same thing, that and you may feel you do, and I understand, by the way, I was going to say, that if you did choose to make that pledge, if you feel that you have, as indeed I feel I have, then we also need to understand that it is a never-ending journey, that we'd have to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and how exciting that is, that there should be no end to the depth that we could go to in meeting that. Because after all, the children's fire is simply a pledge to life. That's what children are. And by the way, also, it's not just the children of all human beings, it's the children of all non-human. It's life. I pledge myself to life. I give myself to this.